Hello everyone, it's David again, here with Babylon 5, Season 1, Episode 8, and the Sky Full of Stars, which is a reference that Sinclair made in the pilot episode as his fellow compatriots were getting shot at during the Battle of the Line, which was the last battle of the Earth-Minbari War. Technically, we won that battle. What happened is the Minbari gave up. And the reason they gave up is because, spoiler alert, I'm not going to tell you. So, you have to figure that one out on your own. And it's also said that fewer than 100 people managed to survive the Battle of the Line, and Sinclair was one. Possibly due to him being taken aboard the Minbari vessel, which they delve into quite a bit, or at least partially, in this episode. So, two men meet in customs. Their names are originality award, I should say, should be given to Night 1 and Night 2 as their code names. Hooray for originality. Night 1 is Judson Scott. He's a tall blonde guy, and you'll recognize him instantly. He has been in many, many sci-fi series. I remember him mostly from the series V, the television series. I believe he was second to Diane. He does a lot of secondary work because he's also Khan's second in command in Star Trek II, as well as the original Star Trek series. He plays Khan's second in command. If for whatever reason, I can't fathom why, but if you have not seen Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, that, in my opinion, is the best sci-fi movie ever made. And he plays the second in command. So these two guys meet in customs and go off on their merry way after they exchange greetings. Oh, Night 2, by the way, I forgot to mention, his name is Christopher Nimi, I believe is how you say it. I wasn't as familiar with his work, but he has also been in just a few episodes from what I can tell. So go ahead and dig that up. And if you find other works of his, please go ahead and put that in the comments. It flashes over to a security officer who is getting roughed up by these guys. They turn out to be gambling sharks, and he owes them money. And he's got to figure out a way within 24 hours, or they're going to turn him into minced meat. He gets confronted by Commander Sinclair very shortly thereafter, and Chief Garibaldi. Evidently, they are security officers are not allowed to gamble while on duty. Off duty, they're allowed 50 credits per episode. He has been writing those limits, but as Garibaldi says, there's a lot of off gambling going on, and if this guy is involved in it, they're going to find out, so they place him on administrative leave. So this guy is feeling the candle from both ends, as we like to say. So he's got to figure out a way, and fast, to come up with some money. We flash over into some rented quarters. The two, Night 1 and Night 2 that I mentioned, they identify their target, and up pops a little a CGI of Commander Sinclair. So they are targeting Commander Sinclair. For what reason, we don't know just yet. What happens very shortly afterwards is they need a power source, and Night 1, Judson Scott says he couldn't bring one on board because it would never get past the sensors, but he made an arrangement. Very shortly thereafter, Benson, the security agent who was in trouble, he comes up, knocks on the door, and he has a very big energy pod, the biggest one that he could get. So Night 2 basically says, thank you very much. your funds will be deposited in your account within the hour. Benson says, yeah, but what about my ticket out of here? So evidently he was supposed to get a ticket to greener pastures and away from Commander Sinclair and Chief Garibaldi, who are after him for too much gambling. And basically Night 2 says, thanks for your help, buddy. Your way off this station is your problem. It's not ours anymore. Good luck, and shuts the door on him. We flash over to MedLab, and Dr. Franklin is doing an examination of Delenn. Now, Delenn does not appear to be sick, and in fact, she's perfectly fine. Dr. Franklin wants to get what we call in the medical profession a baseline. He said that it's very helpful to have Delenn and as many Minbari as are willing to come in and submit to voluntary scanning and having their baselines taken so that he can develop a comparison, so when a Minbari comes in who is sick, he knows what he is looking at. And I can tell you, having been a nurse for 18 years, that is extremely helpful. That's oftentimes your doctor will get an EKG tracing even though you're not having any chest pains because he wants to have a baseline. Or he'll do blood work on you even though you're not feeling sick because he wants a baseline. One of my nursing instructors explained to me that 90 to 95% of people that you'll encounter, David, will react a certain way. It's the other 5 to 10% that you got to watch out for because they will get sick really fast, and if you don't know what you're doing, they could have very terrible outcomes. So having that kind of a resource, having a healthy baseline to compare things to is helpful to medical professionals because sometimes people don't know or can't express in English what's going on with them. And a lot of times they'll just shut up because they want to be the good patient and not the bad patient and be complaining even though they're having severe chest pains because they're having a heart attack right in front of your face. And if you don't catch that, that person can die on you and you can be in some trouble for that. So that's why Dr. Franklin is doing it, and that's why Delenn is willfully submitting to his ministrations. Delenn asks him that she had heard that he used to, quote, hitchhike on various ships. He would trade his services as doctor to get free rides wherever these ships were going, and that he got to see a lot of different things until the Earth-Minbari War. And he said that at that point, when things started to go bad for the Earth Alliance and the Minbari were coming for the jugular, a lot of officers, and we'll see these in future episodes, some military officers went to Dr. Franklin and wanted his notes on the Minbari, like immune system, nervous system, things of that, to develop weapons of mass destruction. And Dr. Franklin, rather than having his notes used to kill other sentient beings, he destroyed them. And we'll learn that it cost him quite a bit personally as well as professionally. And Dr. Franklin asked Delenn, what did you do during the war? And she says, that's kind of a topic for a different time. And as we all will know, or those who regularly watch Babylon 5, Delenn is the actual final vote that started the Earth-Minbari War. And by implication, you can say that she was the result, or was the casus belli, I think is the Latin term, for the Earth-Minbari War. But of course, Franklin knows nothing of that, and I don't even know if Delenn's future husband, John Sheridan, ever learns that fact. If anyone could put in the comments whether they know the answer to that question, I'd really be fascinated to know, after all the years that they were married and everything, Does John Sheridan ever figure out that his wife started the war? That would be very awkward. But it also, I think, when Sinclair talks about later on wanting to strangle a Minbari whenever he saw one, because they killed a lot of his buddies, I think that somewhat speaks to the human power for forgiveness, or at least to me. It has a real life implication. Having been a nurse on the Pacific Coast, in Portland, we have a large Japanese community. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is one day I had a Japanese patient come in with very severe lung cancer. We say it's metastasized to all over his body. And I was going through his history because Asian men generally tend to lead what we call clean lives. They eat nothing but fish and rice. They exercise. They generally don't have the weight problems like I do, as I'm sure most of you have noticed that. And so I was like, have you ever been exposed to anything like radiation? Thinking maybe he lived near a power plant. And he grabbed my hand and he says, David, I was born in Hiroshima and I was there when the bomb went off. And I was like, oh, okay. I went to change him into a hospital gown, and it took everything within my power to avoid jumping back, pointing at him and saying, holy Shinola, what the hell happened to you? It was very obvious from what was on that this guy got the full brunt of the blast. And in fact, he told me later that he was going to kindergarten in Hiroshima, and he literally was at ground zero. There's no lying or getting around that. From what I saw, the scars and everything on his back were just, and I almost was in tears, trying to say I'm sorry. And he grabs me by my hand because he sees I'm about ready, to lose it. One of the only times in my 18-year career where I've lost it in front of a patient. I've lost it at the nurse's station plenty of times. But he grabbed my hand and he was like, David, how old are you? And I'm like, well, I was born on March 30th. And he goes, what year? And I said, 1972. And he said, David, you were not even in existence when the bomb was dropped on my city. He says, you have no responsibility for what happened. And I said, yeah, but how could you come to the United States, the land of your enemy, and make peace with us, in other words. And he says, David, I love the American people, and I love the United States. I came to the United States, and I married an American woman, and I had 4 children, and I love this country, and I love its people. I hate the government and what they did, but the people are different from the government. And I think that speaks a little bit to what JMS was trying to get to. Sinclair and his coming to forgiveness terms with the Minbari, and even having a Minbari ambassador as his friend. And as we'll find out later, he goes to Minbar, fights a big war with the Minbari, marries a Minbari, and ends up being the ancestral grandfather to about 25% of the Minbari population, but that's a spoiler alert for a different day. So, back to And a Sky Full of Stars. We come into the area where these guys have set up some sort of elaborate chair for their purposes with Sinclair. Now, it flips on over to Sinclair, supposedly in his quarters, and he's having a nasty dream. And it's one of those dreams that he can't get out of. And we find out later that he has, in fact, been kidnapped, somehow dragged across the station with no one noticing, is in this chair with all these electronic gizmos and these hookups of drugs that we learn later. And oh gosh, they tell a little bit later what exactly it is, but I forgot to write it down, so shame on me. Watch the episode and you'll get it. And this guy, Night 2, Christopher Nimi, is running around in Sinclair's mind, trying to get to what happened in the 24 hours that Sinclair supposedly can't remember. We flash on forward to Delenn going to security and say, hey, Mr. Garibaldi, have you seen Commander Sinclair? Because we were supposed to have a meeting with him an hour ago, and he's never late, but we can't find him. So Garibaldi, and she says, and we asked Commander Ivanova, or Lieutenant Commander Ivanova at this point, and she had no idea. She hadn't seen him since last night. So Garibaldi says, well, let me get back to you. And so he tries to get a hold of Commander Sinclair. Of course, he can't. He ends up going to Sinclair's quarters and finds out that, in fact, Sinclair has been taken, and finds his communicator at the bedside. So somehow these guys got into Sinclair's quarters, anesthetized him or knocked him out somehow, and managed to drag him across a 5-mile-long space station with no one noticing. But that's the wonderment of sci-fi. They don't necessarily have to explain everything to my satisfaction. It turns out that this chair is a virtual reality cybernet. And it turns out that you can feel pain during this cybernet as they go through Sinclair's mind. Sinclair gets zapped. But during the course of him getting zapped, he turns around and punches this guy, and all of a sudden it catches him by surprise, knocks him to the ground, and in fact knocks him out of this virtual reality. And Sinclair's like, aha, it seems like the pain is real for you too, pal, and notices that he can move his right arm in real time, and that becomes important later in aiding in his escape. As it turns out, the big tall guy, Night 1, Judson Scott, is watching over these guys. Sinclair is in this full getup, and Night 2, Christopher Nemi, is in a chair, and he's got a kind of a smaller version set, and as he gets knocked out, he kind of takes it off, has a glass of water, tries to compose himself, and tells Night 1 to turn up the drugs and turn up the cybernet. Well, he gets warned by the blonde-haired guy that doing that might cause him to hallucinate. And he's like, I don't care, we're nearing, and inadvertently helping Sinclair to figure out what happened during these 24 hours of his life that he can't remember. Because, as you'll remember, during the Earth-Minbari War, at the very last of the Battle of the Line, there's 24 hours where Sinclair is off the grid. We know that he was beamed on board the Chief Minbari cruiser that holding the Great Council, the 9 Satai, and that he unmasks one of the Satai, and lo and behold, it's Delenn. Now, is it Delenn in his imagination, or is it Delenn in reality? Well, watch the episode. You'll get the answer to that, or at least, well, maybe you will. Put down in the comments what you think it is. Is this Delenn in real life, or is this Delenn in hallucinations? We find a little bit about Sinclair. Let's see here. He is born May 3rd, 2218, and he actually was born in Mars colony before he enlists in Earth Force. Little nugget of info there. Let's see here, go through here. The guy, now, Sinclair being missing, of course, that brings up the red alert on everything. Security's running to and fro, and the security guy who supplied the package, the power packet, Benson, is getting awfully nervous. He just wants to be out of here. And, of course, because they didn't give him his plane ticket to home, he has nowhere to go. The station is looking for him, and Garibaldi's second in command, in fact, puts him on the search because he pays off all of his debts. and let's see, I think it was $15,000 credits. And he pays $10,000 that he owes, and he's got a $5,000 surplus. Well, of course, Garibaldi is like going, hey, wait a minute. Where does a grunt security guard all of a sudden, in less than 24 hours, come up with that kind of money? Well, Benson goes to confront the other two guys, hears a struggle going on, sees Commander Sinclair in this chair, and he's like, holy crap, what have I done? And you hear Night 2 say the word terminate, and Night 1 shoots Benson and kills him with the PPG. Now, during the search for Sinclair, Garibaldi puts maintenance bots on the outside to look for a body in case Sinclair was jettisoned out an airlock, to which Ivanova says, Michael, I'm very glad that I don't have to think the way you do sometimes. And that becomes important because this Benson guy gets thrown out the nearest airlock. Well, the maintenance bots find Benson's body, and Garibaldi, who's in charge of the search, says, hey, it couldn't have been very long that this body was out there. We had the maintenance bots looking, so let's find where the nearest airlock is and start searching right there. At this point in time, Sinclair, as they're going through their confrontation in Sinclair's mind over what happened, Sinclair starts to be able to move his arm quite a bit. Let's see here. And, in fact, as they're going through their confrontation, Night 2, Christopher says, why did the Minbari surrender? Have you never questioned your blanking out story? And he said, well, once, and that's when the Minbari, during the pilot episode, says, there is a hole in your mind. Like I said, that mem and is going to come up frequently in the Babylon 5 universe, and here is where it comes into play, is there's a hole in your mind. Sinclair is disabled, and he tries to ram the cruiser, figuring if I'm going to go down, I'm going to take some of you bastards with me, is what he says. Well, his ship is purposefully disabled and dragged aboard the Minbari cruiser for questioning. And a little bit of, he has what's called this little triangle device pointed on him, and the triangle device we know as the Triluminary. Those who are fans of Babylon 5 will recognize it as a Triluminary, which is the Minbari's most holy relic. The Triluminary is, in fact, set up to detect the children of Valen. Well, it lights up for Sinclair, and to the Minbari that signifies that he is a child of Valen. That Minbari are kind of less, not up to the generation before, and they become less and less and less, and their reasoning is that now humans, or Minbari souls, are being born into humans. What we know is Sinclair, when he goes, and this is spoiler alert, so put it on mute for a few minutes if you don't want to know this information, but we know that Sinclair goes back in time in Babylon 4. We know that he finds a Minbari wife, that they have children. Those children are discriminated against, so they're kept quiet. They go off, have children, and in the intervening 1,000 years, his DNA is being thrown throughout the Minbari population, and is possibly he is possibly responsible for up to 25% of the Minbari population. Sort of like Genghis Khan. I think he's DNA has been found in 2% of all humans, no matter, all throughout this globe of the earth. And that's kind of what has happened to Valen. I almost said, same difference, Sinclair, Valen. So, let's see here. The Triluminary is used. It lights up because we know it's set to detect human DNA. So they zap Sinclair, wipe his mind out of the 24 hours that was there, put him back in his ship, and then surrender. And we know that that's kind of how the Earth-Minbari War ended. Now, we'll get into how it started, and I alluded to Delenn playing a big part of it. That comes into play further on in the series. Don't worry, we'll get to it. Now, in current time, Sinclair is able to wrestle his arm out, and Night 1, or Christopher Nemi, Night 2, whatever, the guy sitting next to him, Sinclair, bashes his cybernet, ends up setting up a feedback loop and fries the poor dude's brain. Well, Sinclair rips his way out, and he's completely on drugs, and he's delusional. Fights and gets a PPG gun from Knight, the blonde guy, and they end up, he wanders his way down to the Zocalo. Gets into a firefight and ends up killing Knight 1, the blonde guy. Delenn comes down, and she basically zaps Sinclair out of his drug-induced reverie, gets him to drop his PPG. Sinclair is taken to MedLab. So, it ends with Sinclair going to thank Delenn, and she says, hey, do you remember anything about your little drug-induced trance? And he lies and says, nope, don't remember a darn thing. Of course, we all know that that's a lie, but he knows that there's something the Minbari don't want him to remember, and he is going to try and figure out what the heck it is. And as we all know, that comes out much later in the series. But it ends out, after Sinclair leaves, after thanking Delenn, there is a an unnamed Minbari. I believe he's part of the religious caste. He's got this weird-looking gray triangle on his forehead, and that comes into play later with Delenn. But this guy warns Delenn that if she finds out that Sinclair is having memories of his 24 hours, that she is to kill Sinclair. I thought, whoa, that's kind of dramatic, and that's kind of how it ends this episode. So I would be interesting to know, do any of you agree with my little spiel on the power of forgiveness, that even though we are capable of doing horrific things, I mean, that we nuked Japan, and this one Japanese dude who was literally at ground zero, suffered horribly, ends up becoming one of his enemy, quote unquote, comes to the United States and becomes an American citizen. Or am I just, as wrestling manager Jim Cornette says, am I just smoking the hopium? And that has absolutely nothing to do with it. And what does this episode bring to mind when you watch it? As always, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, or in addition to it, please share. And I hope you all have a good rest of your day.